I just got a text message from a friend of mine, retired federal narcotics undercover agent. There's a guy who has had a couple of lifetimes in one. He's actually in Maryland right now. He traveled there so he can shovel out his mother's house tomorrow. He was listening to that Jimmy Kimmel bit. I can't completely share all of the text with you, but he does say it's pathetic. 944, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and News Radio 1310.com, 736-0300, 736-0300. Again, we need a literacy test before anybody votes. We really do. They have to be able to have some basic knowledge before they go out and demand that the government give them some new toys. We have a caller with us. You're up next, and you're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com.
Good morning, Bill. I think they did show the literacy tests. The thing that we don't understand is they know the power of a dead person's vote.
Yes.
You know, in their districts, dead people are what elect what they want. Two, we got to watch out and really, really do our due diligence in studying our candidates and stuff. I really love what Trump says, and I like that he says it, but he scares me to death because when you look at his past history, it's not very consistent.
Yeah.
It's a flip-flopping deal of everybody else. And if you go back to the YouTube clips of Obama campaigning and watch his campaigning, there's a lot of similarities that scare me to death.
That was one of the comments made by the writers at National Review. Was I think somebody's bringing the point out at the similarities of this. What do we really know about this candidate? Because we didn't know a whole heck of a lot about President Obama.
Yeah, well, same thing, but he's promising utopia. We're gonna win so much you're gonna be tired of winning. That is a promise that is very, very, very hard to keep. No one can predict tomorrow. No one can promise that something is actually going to happen tomorrow. I can tell you the sun's going to come up, but can I tell you that if it's going to rain for sure or not? Is it going to be overcast for sure or not? No. There's no guarantee in life. But if you look at his past history, you can see how he's flopped and flopped and flopped.
Well,
there's only one candidate up there that has a proven track record, and that's it.
And he's actually flip-flopped more than Marco Rubio. The thing is, I think he's aware with a hyperbole when he says, I'll build a wall and I'll make Mexico pay for it. I think he realizes he's probably not going to get them to pay for it, or he's talking about some other sort of deal where, perhaps you create some program with them. I don't know, shared program. But I think he realizes that he's a little over the top with what he says. But I do think he realizes he can't quite do all of the things in quite the way that he says. But this is what he'd like to do, even though he knows he can't do it.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I'd like him to do everything he says too. But it's the promising and the blind following that just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and his fans, they will attack anyone who has the audacity to suggest another candidate might be good.
Yeah, well, bottom line, everybody has their opportunity to vote. They're going to vote. No one can convince you to vote anyway, one or the other. I just ask that you do some studying.
Yeah. Thank you much for the telephone call. It's 947. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And you're on the air.
Yes, you were talking about coal earlier. Since the Obama administration has been in existence here, they have shut down 400 coal-fired generators across this nation. If an environmental group sues whoever, the Obama administration has what they call sue and settle, and they end up giving these environmental groups a settlement, cash, and it just perpetuates their existence. And for instance, like Arch Coal filed for bankruptcy, and one of their huge coal mines in Montana, like you were talking, if they put Arch Coal out of business, there's going to be, you know how they reclaim the area,
Mm-hmm.
put it back to environmentally, whatever, accountable. This is going to, if they shut down Arch Coal, there's going to be $458 million worth of unclaimed, reclaimed, soil, you might say, earth, that is going to be left open. And here these people claim to care about the environment, but they're creating this very problem by what they're doing. And you see, but it's the same old story, and I'll hang up.
Yes, yes. I'd like to thank the host of the shows for chiming in this morning multiple times. 10 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Everyone's hearing the show, though, well today. You've heard what I've said before, so unless, of course, there is some difficulty and you've noticed it lately with trying to hear. So you need to contact Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. That's at 1218 9th Street, unit number 2. You can give her a telephone call at 208-312-0957 or go online, mountharrisonaudiology.com. Hearing loss and dementia are linked. Hearing loss becomes a great burden on the brain as you have to expend more time and energy to decipher what others are saying. Treating hearing loss reduces the strain and makes hearing more natural. Keep your brain healthy by taking care of your hearing. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning. I'd like to know who these people are over in western Idaho that are calling themselves followers of Christ. I am a follower of Christ, and it's written in American law that, and in God's law, that the government of this nation doesn't have a right to do anything with me other than to question me to see if I'm a threat to the public. Once they find out I'm not a threat, it's their duty to leave me alone. So how is the government going after these people if they are actually followers of Christ?
Yeah, and I thank you. That gets me into the story I wanted to mention. This Nathan Brown from the Times News delved into this, and Senator Lee Hyder does say that he is going to allow the bill to come to the floor. Although he said he has visited these people, and he says that they are good people, and they truly believe that that prayer and putting your faith in God when someone is ill in the family is the direction to go. Let's be honest about this. If you, and the people who are behind it, the fellow John Gannon from Boise, he's a Democrat, of course, and a liberal. He's tried to do this before. What they are saying is essentially well, your faith in God isn't enough. That's what they're telling all Christians and all observant Jews. That's what they're telling us, is your faith in God isn't enough, which is then saying that God is not almighty, which is then denying God, right? Ultimately, that's what you're doing. Are you trying to tell us that? I think that this is a pretty cut and dried case, but in Oregon, they already force government will come in and drag those children away and get them treatment in that situation. I realize it's touchy and it's heartbreaking when you hear about one of these children passing away. And people say, yes, but something could have been done for them. God did allow us to develop medical science now, didn't he? And I would think that they would at least understand that that's a route to go. It's like that story about the guy who says, when he gets to heaven after drowning in the flood, God, why did you let me drown? And, he mentions, he said, well, I sent, a police car by to tell you to get out. Then I sent the guy in the boat to tell you to get out. And then I sent the guy in the helicopter while you were sitting on the roof trying to pick you up. And you kept saying, you're going to trust in me. That's important in all of this. However, today I want to bring this up in light of the fact that this afternoon, now they're talking huge snowstorm in Washington, D.C. There will be 500,000 people. Establishment media will basically ignore it, or they'll go out and make fun of them for marching in the snow. There will be 500,000 people in Washington today attending and participating in the March for Life. I've done that myself. I went there, it'll be 4 years ago. I went with a church group, and it had snowed in Washington. The weather had been great all winter. It just never fails. It had snowed in Washington. We did it on a Monday. It had snowed in Washington the previous Friday night and into Saturday. And then it had all started to melt. And we got there, and there was a low-hanging fog over the National Mall. And we went down to the mall so we could hear some of the speeches. In fact, John Boehner, who I never had a lot of respect for, gave one of the best pro-life speeches I've ever heard from the stage that day. And there was even a Democrat, one of his fellow congressmen who was there from New Jersey, who also spoke defending life. So there are still a few of those old-fashioned Democrats left in that sense, but not many. For all of these people, this John Gannon who says we need to control people who will not take their children to the doctor, I bet Mr. Gannon wouldn't lift a finger to prevent an abortion or to shut down Planned Parenthood. In fact, he thinks it's a good idea. If you're so dang worried about the health of children, Democrats, then why do you allow them to be torn to pieces in their mother's wombs? 9:55. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I was there that year. There were 440,000 of us, I believe was the estimate. Many of them children, young children. And even though younger generations seem to be more libertarian and more liberal, when it comes to abortion, they are more conservative than mom and dad. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, I know that God gave us the ability to come up with all this medical knowledge and everything, but when the government uses that knowledge to suck the people into their jurisdiction, and or when they go breaking their jurisdiction and going after people they have nothing to do with, it's still wrong, and it's our duty to separate ourselves from all this evil.
I agree. And thanks for the third call of the day. They got to get me a screener. That's all. That'll. And I look. I appreciate everybody's opinions, but there's always another day that comes along where we can share them. You don't all have to do it all on one day, because otherwise I can just go home, and they can just open the phones and have a free for all. It's 9:56. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News. I hear that from people on the street. Well, I'd call in, but it's every time I try, it's the same voice repeatedly that they're hearing. And there's a whole raft of them. Actually, it's not just one. You've got about 4 or 5 of them out there that do it. I have to tell you, I think the greatest statement ever made by one of these children at the March for Life is some reporter put a microphone in the kid's face and said, you can be out playing video games or ball, in the backyard. What are you doing here? And why is this important to you? And this little tyke looked back and said, because I'm a child. How much better can that be said? It can't in that situation. 736-0300. About a minute before we wrap up this week. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Almost. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll call it quits because I've likely already heard from whoever it is today. 9:56. Coming up, of course, on 10 o'clock news in just a few minutes, followed by Rush Limbaugh. Limbaugh will have a lot to say, obviously. I hope you stick around for that. He's going to have a tremendous amount of his show devoted to the National Review issue, that issue entirely devoted to Donald Trump and trying to scuttle Trump's campaign. So that's coming up in a few minutes. You won't want to miss that. Sean Hannity will offer his thoughts on it, too, following 1 o'clock news this afternoon. And if you really want some fireworks, when Glenn Beck, we tee up Glenn Beck just after 4 o'clock news this afternoon. Beck is one of the 22 writers at National Review who say the Donald has got to go. So there's going to be some fireworks throughout the day right here at News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you. And look, have a great weekend. We'll be back, God willing, if the creek don't rise, and do this all over again on Monday between 8 and 10 o'clock. And have a lot of follow-up to talk about on some of these issues, too, as well. I sincerely doubt Mr. Trump is going to drop out of the campaign this weekend because these people would like him to do it. And, in fact, many of them who have been long respected in the conservative movement are likely going to find some blowback because the average voter out there is sick to death of the elites, whether in their own party or anywhere else, trying to tell them how they've got to live their lives. Jonah Goldberg is a smart guy. I don't know that he's a heck of a lot smarter than any of the rest of us. Thomas Sowell, brilliant. But you know what? I can walk and talk, and I can make decisions on my own. I think Glenn Beck is a really nice fellow. But you know what? We can make up our own minds. Glenn doesn't have to do it for us. Have a great weekend, everybody.